On the podcast today, we're going to talk about the Social Dilemma documentary and also mental health and strategies for digital detox, obviously, which aligns with a lot of Eastern spiritual practices. And we'll kind of speak about it maybe in that sort of sequence, in that order, like we'll speak about the problem, what the Social Dilemma talks about a lot, the documentary, and the outcome of that problem or the result of that problem, which is obviously mental health issues all around the world people are having with social media and all of these, new adaptations that we have to humanity, and obviously a solution in some sense. So we had the opportunity to watch The Social Dilemma. I mean, fortunately we don't have Netflix, but we had an opportunity from a friend, and so we enjoyed it. What did you think?
I was a little bit aware of the a negative side of a social media, obviously, but it was a bit shocking. They go deeper into this human psychology, that how they use our mind, the benefit of the business or social media or whatsoever, and how they hired the people who work at casino in the machine, I don't know, the poker machine.
Yeah, the slot machine.
Yes, slot machine.
Pokies, slot machine.
Yeah. So that that kind of triggers human psychology that want more, I need more, what's next, and this kind of anticipation, and that the state of mind leads into that such as an anxious state of mind, and eventually that leads to the addiction.
Yes.
And in this case, social media is not like a band by age group or anything like that. So it's kind of right open to anyone, and anyone is under threat, right? So that especially young generation, young children who haven't developed their psychological state stable yet, so that they're much more open to be addicted to this social media platform much easier than
and to be affected by it detrimentally. Not that adults aren't, but
it's kind of the effect to the young people be much more detrimental. Like you said.
Of course.
It's
we'll talk a bit. As people know who have watched my live stream recently, I talked about a new book, and people probably already know it's about spiritual freedom in the digital age, and about what actually digital technology is doing to our general health and sanity. And as we know, Eastern spirituality is about being fundamentally healthy and sane. And so, as you know, specifically because you're my wife and this is my work, is over the years, especially when I wrote, if you remember, Fasting the Mind, and then especially after that, Emotional Intuition for Peak Performance, a lot of people, for whatever reason, defend their digital habits and they defend their phone use, because obviously I'm pretty outspoken about that, because you and I don't have a smartphone and we've never had smartphones. We have dumb phones. We don't have apps and all of these funny things. And our life is still the same as it was 10 years ago when this stuff started becoming popular, right? And so we've always kept a distance from it because we naturally saw people becoming more addicted to it, and it didn't feel right. Like you jump on a bus or a train and people have got their face buried in their phone, and the phone was the game changer, right? With a lot of social media and this and that. Like I remember back, let's say 2006, when Facebook and that was first around, and there was no likes and stuff. I think you could comment on posts and stuff. I can't remember really exactly what it was, but it wasn't that appealing. It was something.
It was very basic and almost like a personal blog page type of thing.
It's a bit like that, and it was kind of like you post what you're interested in, and people might comment maybe on it, or they might write to you. Or usually, what would happen when I got first introduced to it, I'd post something, and then my mates would talk to me about it at work the next day. Oh, so I think you posted. That's interesting, isn't it? They would read the article or something like that, and it was very innocent. And then
much more, it had much more genuine use back then, I think.
Exactly, yeah. There was much more of a public utility, right? It was because it was more so about sharing information as opposed to well, these days you share information and someone instantly trolls you or opposes your view. And so we're starting to police each other psychologically and how people think. And this is actually going backwards in human psychological evolution, because we're policing each other and we're not being nice to each other. Conversations start with arguments and, all of this sort of ridiculous stuff. But as they introduced the like button and stuff like that, and sharing and retweeting and refining the algorithm, that was all built on, as you said, on the way casinos operate, actually.
In that documentary, I don't remember his name, but he's one of the guys who was part of creating the like button project in Facebook when he used to work for Facebook, and he was saying that one of the main ideas from creating the like button is to promote like the good energy, like positive things, to highlight the positive message and post and picture, whatever it is, so that friends in online on that platform can like praise each other, or like they can just support each other and as genuine friendship. Yes. So he never kind of envisioned that button will be something as a judgmental tool on online world, right? And over time, because of the social media landscape, which also can boost our negative psychological effect, so the like button became like a bit of a popularity, and more likes you have is like kind of you're a better person or something, and that kind of thing. And if you don't have much likes, and then like you're not a good person, or you're not very popular or wanted.
You have no value. You have no value.
Yeah, you have no value. That type of thing. So
vanity metrics.
Yeah, which is very sad actually. Which the idea actually began from the positive reason, but then it came the other way around.
And then the like button evolved to having like emoji things where you can actually go to hit the like button, but you can put an angry face and stuff like that. I remember I put a post up, must have been a year or so ago, about Hindus, trying to claim their identity back after hundreds and hundreds of years of invasions and being made feel guilty because of their spirituality. And there's an uprising in India of Hindus, which India is mainly Hindus, but some woke guy who's on my friend list put an angry emoji on it, and he has no skin in the game, which we'll talk about later. About this, has no skin in the game, doesn't know the Indian landscape, doesn't understand the hundreds and hundreds of years of suppression and invasions. But I thought to myself, you're an adult, and you put like an angry emoji on a post to a stranger you've never met. I mean, you have to ask yourself where you are in life, if that's where you are. Like, I always mention this on the podcast, like if you're hitting dislike buttons on YouTube videos and stuff like that, you've really got to reevaluate your psychological state, because you're an adult, you know what I mean? And so the way you are offline, it should be how you are online. There's no exception there. I have zero tolerance for that. Zero tolerance for having two split personalities because two worlds are apparently different. They're not. There's other people behind the other screen that you are psychologically affecting. And we're going to talk about suicide, and we're going to talk about all those things a bit later. But getting into the beginning of what we're going to talk about is how the two specific behaviors they use against us, evolutionary behaviors they use against us, which casinos have used, but social media has taken advantage of it a lot. And I just want to read a little bit from my new book. I'm not going to tell you the title yet, but so just to explain it, actually, Adam Alter, his book Irresistible, he explains that many forces that drive our addiction to digital technology, right? So there's two forces are primary in how tech companies exploit digital addiction: intermittent positive reinforcement, first behavior, and the drive for social approval. These two right here, right? And I say so. Positive reinforcement and social approval have long been a part of social dynamics and were both important in our evolution as a species. Gaining social approval was important for an individual's survival, obviously. And the only way to do that was by somehow gaining positive reinforcement from the group, being of some value, like what you were talking about. Yet we surely should have evolved out of both behaviors, but old habits die hard. The tech industry understand that these two behaviors are hard to kick, and so they lean into them, much like the gambling industry. And I'll just leave it at that. But so those two evolutionary behaviors, so that intermittent positive reinforcement and the drive for social approval. You know, a lot of people don't know I wrote this in 2018. Publishing can be a tough gig, let's put it that way. So that's what they're exploiting, right? Like what you said with the like button. So when you're getting a lot of likes and a lot of love hearts and so forth and so on, this is reinforcing your approval within the group, right? So you feel welcome and feel part of it. These evolutionary behaviors were once and very important because, like, for example, as we evolved, if you were the outcast in the group and people just discard you because you ran counter to their culture or their beliefs and this and that, you might not have a chance to eat. Say if people weren't empathetic, say, for example, right? There would have been cases like that. And so, you know, having evolutionary behaviors, they do die hard. You can't just erase them. They're the two behaviors, they're the behavioral patterns that these companies prey on, right? That's what gives us the little dopamine hit when we get, you know, likes and like retweets and like, oh, people are liking what I said. But it's, you know, when you put out something that's from your heart and it's honest, but then people don't like it, then you start to get in a fetal position. You might consider deleting the tweet, or I mean, we will talk about cancel culture and outrage culture, which is absolutely ridiculous, that the whole wokeness of it. But that's those two behaviors, right?
Those two behaviors, it's in our gene, it's in the DNA, because it's been part of the human evolutionary process, and that came into place from the very beginning of human evolution, so that we have that in our gene, and that is part of human nature, and they use these social media companies not really against us. Yeah, you could say you use it against us for whatever reason, profit business,
influence,
so on. Influence and all that. So that we need to take some sort of responsibility for ourselves here, because I fear that social media is becoming part of the culture, right? And human beings is such a social and cultural animals. So from that perspective, social media become part of a big part of a culture right now. So that where is this culture lead humanity to, you know? Yeah.
And it's a toxic culture, right? Like, because people are developing, short attention spans. They're developing troll tendencies. They're argumentative. They're not nice to each other because they don't have facial cues and so forth and so on. So they think that they can behave any which way. Like, that was one of the core principles of Confucius, right? One of the good things he said was, you can tell a lot by a person by the way they behave by themselves when they're alone. Yeah. And so, if this is the way people are behaving on their own, then we're in big trouble. But they're exploiting those behaviors, but the problem is, the big thing in exploiting those behaviors, like what you said, like they're influencing and becoming the culture. And so that's why you see in places like Bhutan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, these in South India especially, South Asia especially, Pakistan, you see Western influence come in, not because the British are invading anymore, it's because it's coming in through the digital streams. And then they begin to run the public discourse in a country that's very foreign. And so they have no skin in the game, right? They have no skin in the game in that culture. But because what someone's doing in America might be attractive, those people are looking at it and this and that. And then we take on America's problems as our problems and so forth and so on. This is very unnatural because that's actually not how nature is. You're not supposed to know everything, and you're actually not supposed to have that much access to that much information. That's why a lot of people are suffering from anxiety and so forth and so on, because you're processing a lot of information, which is mainly junk, and your mind can't keep up with it. We are wonderful at achieving tasks, but we're terrible multitaskers, even though we can multitask.
That's right.
But in multitasking, we create a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. Essentially, and as science and cognitive science illustrate, is that the mind is analog and not digital. It's not meant to just process and process and process this amount of information, and and to expect someone that processes that amount of information to be sane and healthy, it just can't happen.
Yeah, it's very sad that since the social media platforms basically taken over the world, like you said, that the content of the social media become a big part of every individual's life, and that dictates their lifestyle and the way of thinking and all that, and that eclipses their immediate environment, immediate culture that you already have, and so that you can also appreciate that.
Yeah.
So that you become blind to that your immediate environment, immediate culture, and you keep supporting whatever it's online, so that there is a complete disconnection with where you actually are physically, right? That's why that drives your like a body and mind in the complete opposite direction, which again creates and heightens the anxiety.
Exactly. We look at, like, India is a good example, right? Like with the alt left, like the extreme liberals, like I wouldn't say classical liberals or classic leftists, but this extremeness, this woke ideology that's developed because of social media. They see somewhere like India, for example, and they instantly think that it's not progressive, out of sync with our human values. They're basically their perspective of how life should be, the leftist perspective. And then they just identify Hinduism as being right-wing, when Hinduism isn't right or left. It's a culture, and it's a lot older than political ideals and ideologies. And so they do that, right? And so what happens in India then? Then that outside noise, which has no skin in the game, right, comes in and influences impressionable young Indians who are in university and this and that, who, as we know, when we are younger, like late teens, early 20s, most young people are idealists for a certain amount of time, right? We've all kind of been there where we fight for this and that, but we've never really experienced life. We don't really know enough about life. We just look at life and we see, or we think we know what's the solution and what's wrong with life, right? That's not anything related to culture. It's just it's kind of like an age thing, right? And so, so they're impressionable, and so you have this leftist ideology come into a place like India and influence certain people, and then certain people then become, borderline Marxists or socialists, and then they run counter to Hinduism and try to belittle its beliefs. Not that it already hasn't gone through enough. Hundreds and hundreds of years of being belittled and invasions and this and that. Can India just be what it was originally but see the hypocrisy here is that the woke ideology of the leftists is usually that they stick up for people who have had a tough time, but not in this case for whatever reason. Maybe because they're a majority and they just stick up, they only support minorities. But see, this is what Ashish Dahar's he is the president of Upward and also the Indic Collective, and they are trying to bring back Hindu values and so forth and so on. And he's very vocal about this, about how he uses the skin in the game analogy, right? Like for him, he can observe, like he explains, he can observe the situation in America right now, right? And yes, you can tell that there are problems there. But he's not American. He has no skin in the game. He's not on the ground, right? He doesn't know enough about the subtle nuances about American culture and the history. And so, though he could make an observation, he can't offer an input that's going to fundamentally change. It has to come from within. The difference is with this alt left, this woke ideology that has, and we will talk about this, that has actually developed because of social media. It would not, remember, wokeness would have never existed without social media. It goes in, it looks at a place like India and says, no, you're wrong. We know the best way forward for you guys, and state and religion and this and that shouldn't mix and match, and without understanding that India's form of secularism is different than the Western form of secularism. And so the Hindus in India and people like Ashish Tahar and people like that are saying, why do we always have to be Western-centric? Can't we just be India? Like, why do we always have to accord to Western values and the Western agenda? Not to say, I'm not saying that the leftists speak for all of the West, but because usually the people that the social justice warriors and the woke ideology are usually the loudest people in the world, in the room. They usually run the public discourse, right? Just because they're loud. It doesn't mean that they're the majority. That's what a lot of people don't talk about. But they run a lot of the public discourse. And so that's influencing India and changing the youth to think in Western ways and to think, in ways that are probably not beneficial for, like, India. Because India's its own thing, right? It's not America. It's not Europe. Europe tried to do its thing in India. It didn't work. The British left. Let India do its thing.
Again, we know that the majority of population in India is very down to the soil, and they are very traditional Hindu. But because of this online movement, they're slowly kind of getting into that territory now. And now, a lot of young people are getting influenced by that sort of way of thinking and ideology and all that. But what they need to understand is that from focusing on so much on what's going on in the social media and the idea from the West, you need to see, like, if that influence is actually benefiting in whole totality or not. That social media presence only, I think, now it brings predominantly just a schism and separation in the society, which doesn't bind the people with one another at all. No. And is it that important or necessary to really pay too much attention to, or really, does it really have that kind of value to defend that way of thinking? Again, it's people with no skin in the game. They've got no skin in the game. They have no business. It's like being, the old term of a sticky beak. You're sticky beaking. You're putting your nose where you shouldn't put your nose. You let people sort it out. Part of the problem with the world we've always had is people trying to convert other people to their way of thinking. Christianity is a good example, right? Christianity went around the world trying to influence people with its way of thinking. It worked in some places, didn't work in other places. And it caused a lot of harm along the way. There's nothing good can come from trying to convert people to their way of thinking. What makes the planet and humanity beautiful is diverse thinking and different cultures and different perspectives. Now, if you're a young woke person in America or Europe and you disagree with the way Islam do things or Hinduism do it, that's more for you to overcome than anything else. You can't go around beating the streets. You got to come to terms that your view is subjective. And so and how many times we talk about this on the podcast, but if you have a subjective view of the world, it's a limited view of the world. You can't solve worldly problems and cultural nuances with a limited perspective. You have to come with a holistic. You have to see the world as a whole. If you don't, like what Jiddu Krishnamurti said, if you don't see the world as a whole, there's nothing you can change actually in the world, because you're just coming from your agenda. You're only trying to change the world according to the way that you see it. And if you're a young woke person in your early 20s, I can tell you this, in 10 years you're going to think completely different, because
as people know, as you get older, you do change the way you think as you go older because you've had more life experiences. We have to get out of this idea of absolutist mentality. We have this absolutist mentality about everything without understanding that, you know, humanity is kind of an ebb and a flow. There's a flux to life. And the way that we experience it changes over time, and what we think about life changes over time, and this and that. And usually the great leaders of the world are the ones who can surf that really well and adapt to change and see, you know, what is the right path going forward.
Yeah, I like that you pointed that out, because I wanted to talk about how a lot of people are so opinionated nowadays. Like, as you know, me personally, I don't really have strong opinion, because you can fit different ideas in different angles and it all makes sense. So only when you step back, you get the bigger picture and you'll come up with the right answer,
yes,
the right decision. So having a strong opinion was never for me. I just don't understand like how people have such a strong belief, and that is as if a kind of absolute and correct way of thinking or way of see the world. And again, like you said, from that way of thinking only brings a disharmony and more conflict in the society. And the thing is, like, have we never been opinionated? We have been, but I think because of this online platform, it kind of supports that world of full of opinion even more. That's why it highlights that part of our mind, right? Everyone wants to have a voice, and there's nothing wrong with it. But the problem is that a lot of people come out and say, like, for example, like self-claimed guru or self-claimed whatever, come out and say whatever they think is right, and whether that's true or not, those people get a lot of followers and become popular, and those people become like so-called expert, right?
Yeah.
So like sometimes I think, is it who is that person? Is that person trustworthy? Can I trust him or her? Like, I need to do some research for myself. But a lot of people just take it for granted, and whatever they see, they just believe, 100%, they give everything in, right? All in. He's right, she's right. And that brings out even more loud people. That boosts people to be more opinionated, right? And that brings obviously more problem in society. And even problem in like a immediate relationship too. I think between family members or friends or colleagues, whatever. That's why we build like a wall inside our head, and we live in our own world. Each individual's world is so completely different and distinctive, so that we can never kind of come across that bridge, which is very sad. And now we are in that world, I think, because we both experience that, right?
Well, you know, people coming across the bridge or meeting halfway and this and that is becoming a thing of the past, like because like what you were mentioning, this super opinionated world begins to lack compassion and forgiveness. So, for example, we all make mistakes, right? We've all made mistakes, differing in degree, right? But there's a real lack of forgiveness for people. Like you start to, when you have such an opinionated world online, that's what gives birth to cancel culture and outrage culture. And it all comes from like sound bites, like the ability to comment on something without having any repercussions. You're an idiot. What does he know? You know, blah, 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 like this, you know. And so you're throwing your opinion out, which is misguided and unintelligent, because you haven't, like what you said, you haven't done a fact check on who this individual is. You haven't, like, not that you should take everyone for their word, you know, do a fact check and make sure you're getting the right information, because we heard the other day where information was kind of likened to fast food, right? Like, so what we're getting through social media is processed information. It's not healthy information. It's processed. It's just garbage that's just thrown out there. And a lot of it is not backed by like proper facts and truth and so forth and so on. And that also, stimulates opinions. And so when you're on a spiritual path, as we talk about this a lot on the podcast, is that you want to actually down-regulate your opinions. You want to be less opinionated and just let the discourse run its course, And so it's not that you don't have an opinion, but you're not so vocal, and you shouldn't strive to be an activist. If you follow, and especially an Eastern spiritual path, activism is kind of anti-spiritual according to Eastern spirituality, because you in a sense are trying to come into harmony with the world, and you can't come into harmony with the world if your opinion is subjective and it's from one perspective. So then you are just going to push up against someone else's opinion. It only leads to conflict. You cannot come to any solution like that. You know what I mean? There's not going to be an intelligent discourse between two individuals or two groups or so forth and so on, because you have yelling, and you see all these famous people on Twitter just shouting at people because they're probably frustrated they can't get work or something like this. And it's not just famous people. There's a lot of people they just shout at each other on Twitter, not just Twitter but Facebook and everything, all of those ones. And so then you have it's a funny thing, because you talked about experts, and we talked about processed information, is that this unfortunately leads to the death of the expert. We've spoken on this on the podcast before, because I've encountered this, right? I've been teaching this stuff for a long time, longer than people know me on YouTube. And so when people see me, they judge me immediately by my appearance. They don't know my age. They think I'm in my mid-20s, and then they don't know that this is Eastern philosophy is actually what I do for work. And so they have skewed views on what Eastern spirituality is. I've heard it all. I've heard someone say,
have a big beard.
Yeah, I've got to look like Osho or someone like this, and then I'll get respect. And it's no, so just looking ordinary, you don't get any respect, right? So it's
wearing Batman shirt.
wearing a Batman shirt. So superficial, right? So again, see, they're thinking about it materially. They're not thinking about it spiritually or psychologically. And so what happens is you hear then things for example, I'm not saying that you need to think of me as an expert, but I'm using myself as an example because you and I both monitor my platforms, and we've had people say, that's not Taoism to me, or that's not Buddhism to me, and it's it doesn't matter if that's not Taoism or whatever to you. That's what it is. I teach only what it is. I don't teach it according to my beliefs and so forth and so on. I teach it the way it is. I don't add my flavor in it. People got so mad about the Zhuangzi one, about Robert Zhe. Robert Zhe, him eating human livers. It's a parody. It's supposed to be funny. You're supposed to have a sense of humor. You're not supposed to bring your Christian morality into Eastern spirituality, because morality does not fit. Not the Western morality does not fit in Eastern spirituality. And so people got so mad, that's not Taoism to me. It doesn't matter if that's not Taoism to you. What you follow is not Taoism. You're following your own New Age version of what you think Taoism is, but it's not what Taoism is. Our friend Damo Mitchell, he would say to us, people have actually just got to follow the tradition. They shouldn't add their own stuff. And we're constantly seeing people sprinkle their own little spices on top to suit their own individual personalities.
Just like how in the West people like to define the yoga, for example, right? Yoga tradition is there is only one yoga tradition. There is no flow yoga and I don't know what other ones out there, but all these kind of funny, different and new agey in their own way to interpret it. What yoga is. Yoga is Patanjali yoga. That's where it all came from.
100%.
And if you were to ask those people about, do you know the origin of yoga? They will maybe come up with, my teacher down at the yoga studio. That might be the answer. So they have no idea traditional classical knowledge of these things, but they just want to for their convenience.
Yeah.
They just want to put their own understanding of it, and they want to believe that is it, really.
And that's cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
That's appropriating a certain person or a certain country's or nation's culture and warping it to your own needs and so forth and so on. I've told that story many times about the British Buddhist teacher when his student said, but we don't believe in reincarnation and karma. So, but we like, meditation and satipatthana, mindfulness and so forth and so on. Does that mean we're not Buddhists? Yes, that means you're not Buddhist. He's just pretty blunt about it. That's what it means.
Yeah.
You can't change it and alter it and think that you can just make it up. You can go and make up your own thing, for sure. But it's not Buddhism. Mm-hmm. Just be mindful, it's not Buddhism. You don't go and tell a mechanic to change his ways of, building an engine or fixing an engine. You have no, skin in the game. You have no expertise.
Yeah, you won't have a car,
You won't have a proper car. Mm-hmm. Imagine if I went and told a mechanic how to build a car. It'd be stupid, right? So likewise, when people come to me and they say, that's not wu-wei or that's not karma and this and that, it's like, it doesn't matter. I'm really dismissive on those comments because it doesn't make any sense. Because they've never studied the tradition. I get a lot of people who talk about the yugas, right? But Sadhguru said this. It doesn't matter what Sadhguru said. The Puranas are the authority on the yugas. That's where they came from. And the only other form of yugas that we know is from Sri Yukteswar. And so whether you agree or disagree with either of those systems of the yugas is up to you. But you don't go around and make up your own system and say that someone else is doing it, so that's what it is, and you're not an expert, and so forth and so on. You haven't fact-checked. You haven't had a look. You're shouting again, and this is what happens in the comments section, especially on YouTube, right? People are just shouting at each other. It's verbal diarrhea. It's just verbal diarrhea. It really is verbal diarrhea. What do you know, this and that? I've had all sorts of, ridiculous things, what does this white man know, and stuff like this. And, and that's not deemed racist, someone saying that for whatever reason. You know what I mean? But so how can you say that? You don't know me from a bar of soap. So, and this is what the online culture produces. It produces insensitive people and people who are not, intelligent enough to do their homework. It's soundbite culture. And comments on Facebook and this and that have actually contributed to this kind of social discourse that we have where it's all shouting just one lines and this and that, cancel culture. Oh, he said this, cancel him, outrage. I don't even understand what cancel culture is. What do you want them to do, die? I don't understand that. Cancel, this is not like a computer program. You don't
cancel him. What does it mean?
I mean, it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard. Mm. But that's what that sort of soundbite, opinionated conversations are having effect on the world. And like what you mentioned earlier, it's affecting our youth, really affecting our youth in a bad way. You and I may be able to manage it because you're mid-30s, I'm 40, and most of the people listening to this will probably have a bit of age on them, so we can deal with the nonsense of social media and distance ourselves from it. But young people who are growing up with it is the real worry, because that's where the negative impact on the health and sanity of our youth is happening.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt, the sociologist.
Yep.
Yeah,
psychologist,
yes. He had this very thorough study on how this new generation get affected by this new culture, and since dawn of a smartphone age,
2010, 2011, 2012, that 2-3 year period,
right? So about 10 years ago, we were talking about. So around that time, teen suicide, especially for the girls, didn't even go up this way. It's kind of 90 degrees up.
That's terrible.
And it's going up that way, still going up. Yeah. And that was so shocking. And nobody really wants to talk about this. This is a fact.
Well, this is how stupid it is, right? Let me explain how stupid it is. I actually mentioned, as you know, I mentioned those stats in my book.
Yeah.
Which we'll have a look at. But this is how ridiculous it is, love. Like, because of this woke ideology, in Height mentioning that about girls, about teen girls, and this makes him sexist. But he's just delivering facts. That's a whole other conversation. That's how ridiculous it's getting.
Sexist because these are girls?
Yeah, because it's girls. But it's facts we're talking about here. It's not like he's not making up things.
Oh, okay.
And so I have the actual facts here because I've used those facts and I actually quote Jonathan because he was on a podcast in 2018 with Joe Rogan. And that one you're talking about, this one is the most alarming one, actually. Actually, there's a few of them. But this one is the most alarming one, is that hospital admissions for non-fatal self-harm for girls. And so, I mean, the first two, like, 15 to 19, the age 15 to 19, right, is 62% increase since 2009. 20 to 24-year-olds is 17% since 2009. You would say that those are both alarming in and of themselves, right? But then the most concerning, 10 to 14-year-old, 189% self-harm. You know, when you and I were growing up, and probably most people listening, who in their right mind at 10 was thinking of... You didn't even really know what suicide was.
189%.
You didn't even know what suicide was when you were 10. So when you heard about someone killing themselves, like, say, if you were 10, you would think that was very strange. Not because...
maybe mentally
right. You just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so the first person I knew who took their life was when I was a late teen. I'm not even talking high school here, you know.
Like 19.
Yeah, 18, 19. And so we're talking like... And that was a very isolated case. Like, even though I did grow up in a small town, but 10 to 14-year-olds... this is non-fatal self-harm, but nevertheless, they've been hospitalized and they tried to take their life.
Yeah.
And this is like... And like, so all of these stats, as you see, like depression rates going through the roof for both men and women, women more so here. There are a lot of just outrageous, alarming stats. And this is all sourced work too. This is not like Jonathan Haidt's opinion. This is coming from extensive research for a decade. Yeah. And so, that all of the dates point to the application of social media on smartphones. That's what it comes down to. That 2010, 2011, 2012 period is when it all starts to go. And these stats are only up to, as you see, 2015. So if you see the stats
since 2015 to now,
it's going to be... I hope it doesn't get lower than 10. Let's put it that way. But there was a case, and I may be wrong in this, but there was a case in China of a young girl, and she was either 7 or 8, but the teacher scolded her, and she just got up and jumped out the window. You know what I mean? Like, now, what is wrong with a child's mind at that age? You know what I mean? Like, they've had too much exposure to... There's just too much pressure for a young mind to deal with. We are not supposed to deal with the amount of pressure we deal with as an adult, let alone a child. Our minds are not developed for that. And some people will say, yeah, but I can do it. Yeah, but not everyone's He-Man, you know what I mean? Not everyone's Superman, right? Not everyone can deal with that sort of pressure. Our minds are not evolutionary adapted to these little things with beeps and tweets and bloops and whatever coming out of them. Our minds were never adapted to that. And like what Tristan Harris said, our minds can't evolve quick enough to catch up to the algorithms and to the way that this technology is evolving. And so it's almost like suicide to put your entire life into it. The reason why you and I have a healthy relationship with this, first of all, you don't hardly have anything, but we have a healthy distance from it, and we don't have a phone. I tell people that, if you want to have social media, just don't have a smartphone. So allocate time for when you come home to see if, like...
That's already so much enough. It's enough, right? That's already more than enough. Way more than enough. You
don't carry a big screen TV around with you everywhere. What are you doing? I know, just, think there might be something on Netflix in a second. It's like, bro, you got to work. Like,
I can't miss it.
Can't miss it. Yeah. New Narco series is about to start. It's like, can't you wait till you get home, for Christ's sake? Yeah. So like, this is, when you and I first saw these stats 3 years ago, we just fell off our chair. We were like, there's just no way.
Like there is strict punishment for people who harming young people, underage people,
of course,
right? Physically harming.
Yeah.
But this is a form of criminal almost, like, because the information online is unfiltered, uncensored, and 24/7. So anyone at any age, anytime, anywhere, you can access to any kind of information you want, or you just get exposed to, right? And for young people and under 10 years old, to be exposed to that amount of information which is unfiltered and uncensored is, I think, could be part of criminal activity towards that age people. Because at age 8 years old, what did you know? What did I know?
No, nothing.
At age 8 years old, like, I don't. You just play with friends and like
try to do your best at school, and that's about it.
That's it. You just go around and play with friends and play with dolls and whatever. That's how childhood's supposed to be. Not being on the phone at 12, 24 months old. But that's now it's so common.
Yeah.
That's so scary. Actually, this is, to me, it's scary because these young people are gonna grow up. Right? And what kind of world are they going to create?
Facebook is raising their kids.
Well, that's right.
YouTube is raising their kids.
Yeah, the people who were born after 2010, that time, they growing up with this thing, right?
Yeah,
so it's
100%.
Taking big part of their life. And how is the world going to look like when these people grow up, becoming full adult,
Well, it's already affecting millennials, and it's affecting people born after 2000 and stuff like that. So it's going to have a terrible effect on people, like, as you said, born after 2010, because they are being raised by YouTube and other social media platforms, Instagram, what have you. That can only lead to disaster. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that with suicide rates, non-fatal self-harm, depression. What was this? There was this one here. Do you have a psychological disorder? There's for Gen Z. From that time, both men and women went through the roof, and so you have all these increases in like psychological episodes and depression, and just the general mental health is off. And as what they alluded to in The Social Dilemma in the documentary is that how come we regulate all sorts of things, right? But for whatever reason, social media is not regulated. You know what I mean? Like, you can't turn on television and watch pornography, right? It's just not on.
Yeah.
It's not on network TV or something like that. You have to pay for that, and you have to prove you're an adult and so forth and so on. But with social media, you can just watch porn on social media if you want. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure you can go on Twitter and this and that and go gangbusters. But there's no regulation. And one of the things that, as you know, like I write about and I've talked about for a long time, I'm a firm believer in that social media should be 18 plus. I think that the internet for people 18 and under should only be used for educational purposes. Because, well, the generation you and I were from,
we didn't have any of that.
Nothing. And we were already on a bit of the decline, you know what I mean? The ones before us were even more psychologically probably together and sane, because they didn't have as much, like they didn't have cable television, for example.
They didn't have cable television, no video games.
Yeah, no video games.
No computer at home.
At home, yeah. And so they had to have face-to-face communication. They had to understand social cues, facial cues. They had to be a human. Yeah. They didn't have to be a robot sitting behind a screen and living their life through a screen. And so that's and a lot of people get their back up. A lot of parents, even people in my family have said like, oh yeah, but you know, I need some time to myself and this and that. And it's like, don't have kids then. I mean, your responsibility as a parent is to nurture and raise your children as healthy as possible.
You mean for responsibility for a parent?
Yeah, for parents. Not to let them...
Yeah, to be on the screen for too long.
Yeah, or not to let them be on it at all.
At all.
Go out and play in the park or ride a push bike or whatever. Like, their body is developing. To be cognitively healthy, you have to move your body a lot. You have to experience a lot of things naturally. Instead of sitting behind a desk and looking at a screen all day where you're slunched over like this and you're just zombified.
Physically not active at all.
It's bad enough when you see adults like that, but when you see children, it's terrible.
Yeah, the real worrying sign is that, like you mentioned, these young generation people have not developed their cognitive functions in their brain, right? Biologically, our brain doesn't get developed until age of 30. That's scientifically proven. Yeah. So that you couldn't even, you could imagine how that affects for age 8, 10, 15.
Yes.
So that it's a really worrying thing that these young people get exposed to this device 24/7, and it'll definitely affect their cognitive function, yes. Right? And like you said, understanding social cues and this and that only can come from physical experience, yes. Right? Yes. And that gets eliminated because the kids get to spend much more time on the phone. And it's really worrying because, like, we want to bring healthy and sane and really human children, right?
Yes,
for
course,
the future generation and a generation after that, right?
Of course, yeah.
But if this technology to warp human nature eventually, if you keep going this path, is a real danger.
Yeah. Well, people have probably experienced this, but like, especially when kids get to early teens and they have all of this stuff now, you'll see them like snap at their parents when their parents are trying to, get them maybe to wash the dishes or sweep the floor or something. But they're engrossed in maybe Instagram, or doing a little, one of these things. And so they snap, and then obviously that doesn't end well, with parents. So, I mean, you're developing this very impatient culture, and a culture that's really isolated. People talk about self-isolation through COVID. Forget about that. People are self-isolated through their phone.
Well before COVID.
They're isolated inside their phone, and they live in this world, and they forget that this world is just the byproduct of this world. This is what's important out here, not in here. It's all well and good that, anyone can watch our podcast or listen to our podcast, but for God's sake, go out and live your life too. You know what I mean? Like, don't spend every waking minute inside the machine. Yeah. Look, we can learn a lot from the internet, and we can learn a lot when we listen on social media, but we can't learn a lot when we're barking at each other and propagating our own opinions with a carefree attitude of what other people. Or with a carefree attitude, I should say, with how other people feel. We are psychologically damaging other people. And that's what that sort of 189% result is. That's a result of younger people attacking younger people. They don't have enough life experience to know the eventual outcome of that, right? So we have not evolved. For example, if you put out a tweet, if you're a famous person, and then thousands of people trolled you because they didn't like the tweet. Now, those thousands of people that trolled you are just doing it haphazardly without a care in the world for your psychological state. Yeah. They don't know that you are a real person on the other end of that thing, and it's going to have an effect. How many people, especially because you're from Korea, how many Korean celebrities, now we're seeing a lot of Japanese celebrities, who have killed themselves because of those certain situations where they might have said something that was taken out of context, or some sort of woke person has intuited someone as being racist when they're not racist. They just said something that they thought was racist, and then they get attacked by the mob, by this outrage cancel culture without understanding that there's a human being on the other end of that phone or computer or what have you that is just like you. They have feelings and they have, but they're haphazardly going about it. And this is what's happening with the youth. But the youth don't even have like any sort of filter, maybe, because it's hard for you and I to understand, because I didn't have a mobile phone until I was 21 or 22, 21, 22. So it's hard for me to understand. That was a brick mobile phone too, like beep beep, like you do on this one, like when you're texting or something.
And sometimes buttons don't work.
Oh, yeah, no.
You have to push it hard.
No wonder I never was interested in phones. It took me 10 hours to write a text message, but that's what we're dealing with, see? And so we have no empathy or compassion or even forgiveness for someone who's on the other end of the line.
And like you said, at a younger age, because their emotional state is not developed yet, so that it's kind of can be more loose cannon, like you just, whatever you want to say about something that they saw on the phone. They can't count how it would affect to the other person. They will see that comment, right? Yeah, so, I mean, just like how alcohol and cigarettes are banned underage. Yes. This should be maybe treated the same way. Something that we need to think about, I think.
Well, it's in some sense. I know it's not a substance. You don't and we're going to talk about that. It's not a chemical addiction, but it's a behavioral addiction. Yeah. And so they both have the same, and essentially the same root cause. And so we'll get to that, but in talking a bit more what we're talking about, it's like if we look at, if you went out into the street, right, and you said something, and next minute 1,000 people just came from everyone, no, pointing their finger, pointing their hate at you, like, it's not normal, right? We don't behave like that in ordinary society. So why would you, in some sense, behave like that behind closed doors? Grow up. Don't live with so much like aggression, and don't hide. If you're going to be aggressive, don't hide. Go out and speak to their face. Yeah. Be a human being. Be a man about it, and go out and speak to their face. Don't hide behind a screen and
how does this affect you?
Be a grown up. Be a grown up. You know what I mean? So, and all of those thousands and thousands of years of evolution behind us has got us to where we are nice to each other. We show common courtesy, but we're chucking fuel on the fire. Within 10 years, we're just going, stuff this hasn't worked. Let's just get wild and angry with each other, blame people for nothing, take things out of context, troll them, use fake accounts to abuse people. It's not right? So we've seen a few cases in Australia with the NRL where we've seen a commentator attacked for being falsely accused for being racist, which was ridiculous. And we've seen also a coach get trolled talking about, we won't mention their names, but talking about his daughter as if she's got some sort of mental health problem, which she doesn't. This person didn't know. And what I liked about both of those cases is they stood up. They went to the anti-cybersecurity thing, and they stood up for their rights. And so one of the public conversations in Australia now is, if you're, which may be implemented, which is going to run counter to the big social media networks, is that if you're going to have a social media network, social media account, your name and address and all details will be known to some sort of governing body, whether that be, and that's only not to collect data for you. I know a lot of conspiracy theorists say it's to collect data, but it's to protect the psychological health of everyone online, so that we don't have these trolls that attack people haphazardly without thinking about their own that person's psychological health and sanity.
Again, the social media itself is it's there, right? Yeah. Like now we are in a world that can't even imagine how to live without it, right? It's taken some big part of our human life now. So social media itself always will be there. The deal is, how are we gonna deal with it, right? And just like what you mentioned about revealing your name and your your personal details and this and that, that definitely could be one of the ways to go about, right? And if that could be the solution, then I have no problem with it, because we have to behave in online or offline. Why is there even distinction? I don't understand.
There's no distinction, love. There's no distinction. There shouldn't be a distinction. And for all the conspiracy theorists out there, they know who you are anyway. If you have a driver's license and you have a house and this and that, the government know your name and so forth and so on. So there's no difference with this, with that being online. Doesn't mean that you can see that with your avatar and this and that when you do it, but it means that if you are going to behave in a trolly manner, or you're going to try and cause or inflict harm psychologically on someone, you should be held accountable, just as you should be held accountable offline. And we are held accountable offline, right? You can't go in the street and just start yelling all sorts of insanity. Like, people are going to call the cops and you're going to get arrested.
Like you say a lot of times, that you don't go to some stranger's house and take a poo in their lounge room, do you?
No, of course not, no. So why do you do it to
So let's behave
ourselves, right? So that's it. Like, that's... A lot of people probably don't realize that a lot of people who are on YouTube, creators, like such as myself at the channel, is that we have to deal with so many... Look, to be honest, 98% of people are wonderful. It's on my channel, as you know, you monitor the comments sometimes and so forth and so on, and they're great. People are good. And most people are generally sane, but there is this growing minority of people who are... I don't know, there's something missing, right? Psychologically. And so as a creator, you monitor that and you see that if they are, especially if they're being abusive to you or I or someone else, then you have to take action on that, either block them or delete or whatever, and people, all creators have to deal with that. Now, if you brought in what we're talking about, that behavior would decrease, because then when people's anonymity will be gone, then they won't behave like that, because you will have to have how would we call it? Online social cues. Online social cues would be to behave, like a normal adult, like be an adult, stop behaving like a 5-year-old. Not even a 5-year-old will behave like that half the time. So
yeah, exactly.
So behave yourself, and we have to. That's one way to take care of people's psychological health. Unfortunately, we've had people kill themselves because of being ganged up and bullied online and so forth and so on. And all of the people who bullied and this and that have never been held accountable. Well, I can't really think of... I'm sure there must have been somebody who has to be held accountable, but in general, like, say, for example, that Japanese actress who killed herself a while back, she was ganged up on by a bunch of online bullies, and if there were regulations with social media, she'd still be alive. And so it doesn't matter if you guys disagree with what's being said here. What would you prefer? Would you prefer people to stay alive, or would you prefer for people to have the free will to attack anyone online? That's the line in the sand, right? You either sit on that side or that side. Free will to attack anyone. It's the wild, wild west, and you can do whatever you want. Doesn't mean we have to censor the content and so forth and so on. That's a whole different argument. Yeah. We're talking about just taking care of people's general psychological health.
Yeah, definitely. It's something we need to be more mindful and more empathetic towards other people's psychological state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And a lot of those, like we were mentioning, like even if we look at this whole new woke ideology, that's a byproduct of social media. It's a byproduct of people communicating with each other in a certain manner where political correctness becomes paramount, but the political correctness is skewed. It's not political correctness in the sense of what the political correctness movement was in the 60s. It's completely skewed and built on, let's be honest, a leftist approach to the world. And so if you're not down with that, then you are completely cancelled. But that itself would not have existed without social media. The new renaissance of political correctness is the byproduct of social media. So woke ideology wouldn't exist without social media. Hyper political correctness wouldn't exist without social media. Intellectual imperialism, which we haven't mentioned, would not exist without social media. What's happening to the Hindus, right, is not imperialism, but it's intellectual imperialism, to be specific. So it's someone else's form and ideology coming into another culture and telling them how to think and behave and so forth and so on. And so that's intellectual ideology. Intellectual imperialism, sorry. And that is another byproduct of social media, because all you have to do is tweet something about someone or a culture, and if that gains traction, then you are the authority now, because you control the vanity metrics, like what you were mentioning before, right? We don't look at experts. We don't look at. We look at who's popular online. Oh, he got 1,000 likes on this anti-Hindu post. He must be trustworthy.
Yeah, that just to me sounds so dangerous, because I believe that someone who to become a leader or an expert, you need to have your skin in the game. You need to spend long enough time to know your field thoroughly, and you have a good experience working in that field. All that counts much more than just having a soundbite and getting traction. And and
some people are doing that just to make outrage and to get tweets and to get likes and stuff like that.
They just want reaction.
They want reaction. They want attention. So then you've got to question the fundamental basis of the online discourse. It's not grounded in actual facts and reality.
Yesterday I read just a few pages of Joseph Henrich's book, Secret of Our Success. And this chapter is talking about the reputation and authority. So one of his colleagues was in a jungle in the Amazon or somewhere, or Pacific Island or somewhere, like people who still live in a tribal community, a small tribal community in nature. So his colleagues was working in that little communal society, just observing how they behave in their small society, right? So that even in the community where there is no hierarchy, so that person was focusing on who is the one treated as leader or authority, some kind of authority, even though it's an equal society. So more often than not, that person who gets all the respect possesses all this value for the community. For example, the honesty, generosity, kindness, consideration for others, and so on. All these, loyalty, all these things. To look after other people. So, evolutionary speaking, leader and authority used to be for the people who possess that kind of value, which binds the people one another in the society, and they get selected by other people to become a leader of the group or authority and whatever. That's how we evolved as a humanity, and that's day one since we formed the society in a small scale and got bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's how the thing's supposed to work. So that in that way we would come up with the right leader and right authority. In this context, we can also say right expert on certain field as well, right?
Of course, yeah.
So I think the people who get to deserve to be a leader is someone who brings a real value to society, which binds the people and bring the harmony together, not to get a tweet out and just waiting for for the traction and fishing for reaction, and more reaction you get is better you look.
Yeah.
That's just like that's why it just, to me, it's just ridiculous. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like, and people who react to it, and people who, whether people give credit to that person or don't give a credit to that person, just don't react at all, because it doesn't really mean to you.
No.
It doesn't have any value.
No.
So I don't understand whole this landscape in social media.
Especially for yourself, because it's hard to understand, because you don't have any of that. You have a Facebook that you're hardly even on, and you have nothing else.
Well, at best, I can be online actively is email.
Yeah. And you're a reader, see?
Yeah.
You're a reader. So you read people who are experts, who actually write books, who study thoroughly. You mentioned Joseph Henrich, right? I mentioned Joseph Henrich's book, his new one, The Weirdest People in the World. And this relates to what you're saying. And someone in the comments, I can't remember which platform it was, but he doesn't know what he's talking about.
On Henrich's work?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I mean, like, the thing is that because I've been in the game too long, I know that those conversations go south fast.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask them, actually, why do you think that, and who is an authority on anthropology and evolutionary psychology and so forth, so on, more than Joseph Henrich? Tell me. And why do you disagree with dual inheritance theory and all of these things that he explains?
He is one of the, like, a big professor in Harvard, and he was in the British Columbia University in Canada. And then you need to then question these academic institutions' integrity as well if he doesn't deliver the truth.
You got to question his intelligence, his ability to write a book, and you're just a YouTube commenter or something like that. So you're a YouTube commenter or a Facebook commenter. He actually stays away from YouTube and Facebook and writes books based on over a decade of study and research.
How many pages? 1,000 pages?
Oh man, that book's a massive 700 and something pages. Yeah. Clean out your schedule for the summer. But anyway, wonderful, amazing work and book. But that's where you sit, right? You sit where you value actual real knowledge and not soundbite knowledge. Not that there's real knowledge not that there's not any real knowledge online, but the way it's presented, as you said, you don't really understand Twitter and this and that. I do, and I don't want to explain it to you. It's pointless. But the death of the expert is upon us, because we are like for example, right? There's famous people talk about meditation, actors and this and that. They literally know zero about it. But because they say that they may do transcendental meditation in the morning or something along those lines, people look at them then as an expert, because that's what they do. And it's like, no, if you want to know transcendental meditation, you have to read books by Maharishi Yogi. You have to read like the proper literature. You can't just listen to an actor who does it and say that they're an authority and then follow them because they are successful. What is your motivation then for meditation? Is your motivation for meditation just to get fame and fortune? That's not the motivation for meditation. Meditation is supposed to be liberation. It became, because it got culturally appropriated, part of Western success-driven culture. And so we are slowly but surely seeing the death of the expert in all fields, right? Like, because, like what I mentioned, Joseph Henrich can say something, but someone else can just come out and go, what he talks is crap. If that person tweets that and gets enough traction, then lots of people then start to believe then that he is full of crap. But they have no factual evidence or have no background and don't even have a scope of how Joseph came to his conclusions of some of the research, right? So it's short-sighted. Again, you have no skin in the game. You shouldn't talk about it.
It's like how people like to follow whatever is popular online is also, I think, a big part of intuitive error, because in human psychology, we are social animal. We like to learn from one another. And if one individual, like a famous person or whoever, comes up with this nice idea of, let's say, meditation, and although that person got nothing to do with meditation whatsoever, because of that individual's reputation, people easily get pulled to it. Yeah. So that's kind of intuitive error, because you don't connect the dots between meditation and that celebrity, right? Like there is no direct connection between the two, but because that celebrity is famous person and socially judged as a good person or successful person. So that then he or she is doing this, so that must be good thing. But that's an intuitive error. That's something that then we need to use our cold cognitive mind. That well, is that person expert on this? So does she or he know what he or her talking about? So yeah, we need to have a bit more, apply more of a kind of a intellectual thinking as well at the same time.
Yeah. Well, for example, if a mechanic comes to you, or you go to the mechanic to get your car fixed, and then he starts teaching you about Tai Chi Chuan, you'd be like, interesting. But if he was going to teach you about how to change your oil, or about how the gasket works and or something along those lines. I mean, my knowledge of cars is pretty much null and void. But if he came to you because he is an expert in that field, then you would listen.
Yes.
But if he came to you talking about Tai Chi Chuan and like the way that you're sitting is wrong, and like you'd be like, oh man, who's this jack of all trades here? Likewise with a celebrity, for example, right? Actors may speak about meditation, how it's helped them and this and that. Then they become somehow an expert on meditation. But if they spoke about how to act, then you ought to listen.
Oh, yeah.
That's a different story, because they've already done the groundwork, and then you ought to listen because they're there. You're not there.
Yeah.
But we're not living in that world now. We're living in the world where everyone's a jack of all trades and a master of none. So getting back to what we were talking about earlier, and when we were about to talk about addictions and so forth and so on, but we have to talk, which go hand in hand with digital detox. But as we mentioned earlier, the digital addiction and the addiction to social media and our phones and whatever digital device you use is a result of those behavioral patterns that we've evolved with that have been exploited by the social media companies. So intermittent positive reinforcement and social approval, right? And so actually Sean Parker, the founding president of Facebook, he's talked openly about this before, where just a brief quote, he says that it's a social validation feedback loop. Exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. So exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. So basically they prey on your insecurities is what essentially what's happening. So the feedback loop and the algorithm that has been designed against you, so to speak, is about, like what I say in the book, your time equals their money. So it's all about that, right? So then in saying that, they're exploiting those two fundamental evolutionary behaviors that we evolved with. And we alluded to it a bit earlier, that a lot of people then say that, yeah, that's not an addiction and so forth and so on. But all of those things have changed, because what we're talking about here is not a chemical addiction or a substance addiction. It's a behavioral addiction.
Yeah.
It's an addiction to a certain sets of behavior. Even like I mentioned in my upcoming book, the American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse, in a 2010 survey said that growing evidence suggests that behavioral addictions resemble substance addictions in many domains. So they resemble substance addictions in many domains, right? And so in psychology, just to be clear about this, they say that an addiction is a condition in which a person engages in use of a substance or in a behavior for which the rewarding effects provide a compelling incentive to repeatedly pursue the behavior despite detrimental consequences. And in that, right in that one there, you have the crux of it, because people continue to post and say things like this, and it can come at a detrimental consequence, right? You might have had a good experience from retweeting or posting something. Everyone went, oh yeah, great. But then you put something else that's close to your heart, and they go, oh man, stick in your lane. You're a bit of a jerk, and this and that. And you can't just be a human, We're eradicating humor and humanness and everything from the world with this nonsense. So we're talking about behavioral addictions, and that's what most people are addicted to, is that intermittent positive reinforcement and the drive for social approval. So that's why what we were talking about with the fake experts is vanity metrics. Because the social media landscape has created this, thing, there's this whole thing about vanity metrics, which apparently makes people an expert on something. Now, it doesn't mean that that's all, like, okay, all well and good, like, it's awesome that some people get a lot of experts get a lot of recognition and that. Nothing against that. The problems become psychological when you are in this habit of trudging down this, this path of like always looking for the next like, so you can get the next dopamine hit.
It's pretty crazy that we take it for granted that having a smartphone and tablet and whatnot, but it causes the addiction, and which has direct connection to our brain function, right? The dopamine and things like that. And so that how dangerous and actually extremely addictive too, right? Yeah,
100%.
It's something that we need to manage it. We need to learn how to deal with it. And I think subtly we are all, maybe not subtly actually, we are all pretty much addicted to it. I mean, when we are on public transport, who is not on the phone? Maybe randomly you see a really like an older person at 70s with really grey hair and just reading a book or something, or a newspaper or something. But that's really like rare as well. Yeah. So that we need to kind of individually take a responsibility and take an action to kind of avoid these consequences.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. I remember living in Pai in northern Thailand in 2010 when we were living there, and we'd go to the night market and that. I don't know if any of you guys listening or watching have been to Pai. It's a beautiful place in northern Thailand, and we've had the opportunity to live there a few times. And I would go into the market, and you and I didn't have social media. This is 2010, and so we didn't have social media because we'd just been, studying the great traditions for a long time, living in Asia for a few years, and then I saw that shirt. It had the Facebook logo, but it was all in powdered like cocaine, and someone was snorting the cocaine. Alluding to it's a drug. Yeah, it's a drug, whether you want to believe it or not.
Highly addictive.
It's highly addictive. Some people say it's worse than cocaine. I mean, I don't believe in that because we have to dissect that a chemical addiction is always worse than a behavioral addiction. Best thing about a behavioral addiction is you can correct that fairly quickly with a strong will and determination to get over that addiction. Like, for example, if you had a hectic social media addiction, what's the best course of medicine? Delete all accounts. Get rid of all apps off your phone. People may think that you're a hermit or whatever, but you're not a hermit. You just live in life again. You learn how to breathe. You learn how to just experience life without taking a photo and putting it on Instagram and like documenting your life. Yeah. You're experiencing life again. And so... And
I don't know about other countries, but in Korea there's rehab for...
Yeah, I know. We've seen a few documentaries for that, haven't we?
For like video game addiction and smartphone addiction for young and older people.
Well, it's ironic too, isn't it? Because Korea is the most connected country in the world.
On planet, and high suicide.
Yeah, man, there you go. There you go. And it's really sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember when we were living there in 2013, and again didn't have. Well, I had social media then, but I had obviously no smartphone, and getting on public transport in Seoul and just dumbfounded, looking around and going, wow, like people are just buried in their phone. And then when we found out that there were actually rehab clinics for social media and stuff like that, it wasn't actually a surprise, to be honest with you, because we were on the coalface, we were there. And Korea having like Wi-Fi everywhere and like, I mean, you're tripping over phones, they're everywhere. I mean, you can't.
Like, remember once we had trouble with internet, I called the engineer and he came in like a few hours. It doesn't really work like even in Australia. You need to wait at least a week, at least.
Yeah, at least a week. And that's just, I mean, and everyone's okay to wait, right?
Yeah, that's it. And we just wait because there's no other way, right?
But in Korea, because it's such a connected culture, patience is eliminated.
It is, non-existent.
You better be here within 15 minutes, and then you hear a knock on the door as you're hanging up the phone. So, you know, I mean, I don't know how they teleported there, but they got there quick smart.
Yeah, big time.
And so, there are facilities. I don't know so much in Australia, but I'm assuming that there must be facilities all around the world that deal with online digital addiction, whether it's gaming or social media or so forth and so on. But these social media platforms especially are inculcating this intensity of those two behavioral patterns and causing us to be more addicted than what we actually think. A lot of people, as you know, you and I, when we speak with our friends, we notice that our friends say they're not addicted, but you always see them playing with their phone, and you're like, I mean, it's not our place to say, right? Like, but I mean, from where we sit, you seem addicted because you're fidgeting with your phone all the time.
I think a good sign of someone who addicted to something is when that person defended, yeah, of course. I think that's the sign of addiction.
Well, we're probably going to get a bunch of comments on this podcast from trolls and that are probably going to go blah, 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 you know. You have social media too. Yeah, but I have a different relationship with it because I don't have a phone. And it's a bit easier when you only check it once a day. Yeah. And you know, you actually can enjoy it if in a sense, if you have a distant relationship with it, because then you can communicate with people in a very pure manner, like you're just writing a letter to them.
That's right.
You know? But instead of having been like this always on mentality that's developing, you have to always like, where were you? You know, people start shouting at each other on I don't know what WhatsApp is, but our friend has told us on WhatsApp they get shouted at for like having their WhatsApp turned off for a while. I mean, I don't know how that works, turned off or not looking at it or whatever. But they get shouted at like, how dare you, like, I've been trying to get hold of you for hours. Have you heard of ringing? Like, I mean, now call me old-fashioned, but...
Or just wait.
Yeah, or just wait. As you know, I've had a few cases recently where people are shouting at me on Instagram and on Facebook saying, I have a question that I want answered and I want it answered immediately. And it's like, hold the phone here, kid. I mean, newsflash, I have a life outside of social media and it's a good life and I enjoy it. And I don't respect being yelled at and having a gun held to my head, making sure that I reply. So, but that's the mentality that's happening. See, this is this always on mentality. And it's coming to a detriment to the psychology of people. But that's also part of the addiction, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the addiction. It's about like, well, if I'm addicted, you should be addicted. Everyone should be addicted. We should all be online.
And again, maybe I was going to say that at some point, we need to reassess that sort of behavior here. Like, because someone else down the road, Tommy, is doing, you don't have to do it.
No, of course not. No.
I don't understand why.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes, need you, because of your like best friend, closest friend, closest family member is doing it. You need to also join the team. No, you don't. You don't have to. Like if you have other things to do, just go off and do your own thing. Yeah. I don't understand it. Like So does that mean that you're gonna be not friends with that person anymore? No. You know?
Yeah, of course not.
Like, that's what I don't understand.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well,
Yeah.
look at some of our best friends, right? We speak to them not every day. Sometimes we don't speak to them for months.
Some of them, a lot of our closest friends, like we met them when, like,
Traveling a long time ago.
7, 8 years ago.
12 years ago, probably. 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, so I mean, still come around and pick up the conversation. As
Just like it's nothing.
Yeah, like.
Yeah. Shout out to Luke and Adam, like been trying to get me for about a year on Skype. Like, Jace, look, listen, I know it's a bad time zone, but when the hell? But because the friendship is at a deeper level, there's an understanding.
Yeah.
They know I'm busy. I know that the time zone, you know, between they're both British, so the time zone between UK and Australia is an absolute nightmare. So one of us are going to have to neglect our sleep to, you know, get in a good conversation, or we're just going to have to meet halfway in India or something when all of this situation is over.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I like that idea too. But, you know, if you have to always be in a conversation with someone all the time, that's, you're too, in some sense, too connected. And the conversations then, I talk about this in the book a little bit, the conversations then tend to degrade. They go into gossip. They go into things that aren't valuable because you've got nothing else to talk about. You've talked about every little thing. And once you start talking about gossip and this and that, even the relationship changes. It loses its sense of purity and innocence.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know if any of people who are listening this would agree with this, but I feel that, like, you know, when you are in conversation with someone all the time, or you think of doing something all the time, when you are actually in the conversation with the very person physically offline, it doesn't have as much of a zest. You know, because you were already like
exhausted
online. Yeah, you exhausted your resource. And also, when you're always thinking of doing something, and when you actually do it, it's not as good as what you expected or imagined in your own head.
Yes.
So it loses its purity, right?
Yeah.
That's something definitely we need to understand that as well. Like,
well, even our friends in Australia, right? Like. We don't speak to them for a few months and just like, hey, what you up to? Oh, you want to go and get a hot chocolate or something like that? Yeah, boom. Go and spend like half a day. And there's been no constant dialogue because we don't have WhatsApp and we don't have apps and stuff.
And that's how it used to be.
That's how it always has been.
And that's why that time is much more fruitful, memorable, and much more you appreciate more, right?
Well, you raise a good point because, like, that's how it's always been. But because you and I, and there's actually a growing minority of people who are starting to behave like going back to normal, but other people then start to defend their online behaviour and their obviously their attraction to technology, which is a very dangerous game when you're defending technology over human beings. That's a really strange, a strange attitude in general, right? Like, because people are people and technology is this lifeless thing. It's lifeless. What social media, it doesn't give social media value. Human beings give social media value because they're the ones communicating through it.
Right.
Social media in and of itself is nothing without people. And so be careful what you value, you know. And so, you know, getting back to addictions and so forth and so on, like, we have to tackle these behavioral addictions. And obviously, you know, a little small plug, I deal with this obviously a lot in Fasting the Mind, my book Fasting the Mind from 2017. I actually wrote this in 2015. And Emotional Intuition for Peak Performance, which I wrote in 2017, published in 2020. Don't talk to me about how publishing works. That's a whole other conversation. But we tackle, as you know, and people who have probably read my books, we tackle digital detox and I talk about actually an emotional. I talk about this in my new book, creating a digital-free lifestyle. Not meaning that you don't have all of that, but your focus is on creating a digital-free lifestyle. I mean, you don't have a smartphone. When you use social media, you use it on your laptop or your desktop. Get rid of as many mobile devices as you don't need. So you don't actually need an iPad and an iPhone and I don't know what other gizmos.
Watch.
Oh, the watch. Oh my God, the watch. Oh, don't start me up on the watch.
That was a home run.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So you don't need all of this. I remember when actually I watched a podcast, it must have been about 2 years ago, Joe Rogan, and he said to one of his friends that he bought his daughter a watch and he got rid of that quick smart because he checked her sleep and stuff like that, and she was only sleeping 4 hours a night, and all he kept hearing was beep beep, like, you know, so you're getting like notifications on your watch, and like, come on, man, like, and you know, Joe being a pretty straight shooter was like, that's the end of that one, son, that's gone, like, and so, you know, you got to be a bit realistic, and so to cultivate a digital free lifestyle, you have to be realistic, and to deal with the rigors of over information and just mental activity in general, is you have to incorporate, you know, as I mentioned in both of those books, actually, the 4 fundamentals. You have to revert back to the 4 fundamentals. You have to revert back to nutrition, sleep, exercise, meditation. The 4 things that allow us to have a vibrant life. Nutrition, you're taking care of your physical health. Sleep, you're taking care of, well, actually, sleep takes care of the other 3 fundamentals, because if you have good sleep, then everything else is vibrant.
Most important.
Most important, right? Like when you're sleeping only 4 hours a day and you think you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and you think that he does that every night, you're deluded. He might do that when he has a particular movie and training regime, but no one can sleep on 4 hours every night.
And train like a machine.
It's impossible. And exercise, and not meaning you have to go and just crush it in the gym, but like get a good cardio routine where you start to produce BDNF in your brain, which is very important for psychological health. And
there's also antidepressant.
Yeah, that's one of the things they deal with, depression.
Right.
Is you're trying to produce BDNF, like, so you're trying to get some sort of cardio routine down. Because a lot of people sometimes, not a lot of people, but some people who suffer from depression that can be inactive. Right, so they live a sedentary lifestyle. They stay in front of the computer too much. So exercise is important because you're supposed to move the body.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not rocket science, right? And meditation takes care of the mind and takes care of actually other things psychosomatically as well, depending on which meditation practice you use. So obviously I talk a lot about Vipassana and Zen Open Awareness meditation because they're pretty much my go-to meditation practices. Zen Open Awareness meditation being connected to Zazen, and Vipassana being a path in Theravada Buddhism, so the early Buddhism. And so those schools in themselves allow for, so those meditation practices allow for the mind to settle, which will have an effect on your agitation too. Like this is the whole idea with Vairagya, right? Vairagya being non-reactiveness, and cultivating that as actually as a practice. So if you see your phone there and your mind instantly goes, but you got to catch your mind. I don't need to pick that phone up. There's no reason. I checked 10 minutes ago. What's going to be changed? I'm not that famous. If people get so mad at me because I mentioned in my books, if Christopher Nolan doesn't have a mobile phone, then
still using a fax machine.
Still using fax machine. So why should you? And then they go, oh, but he's got an agent, and you know how people get so emotional and they defend technology. It's like, but the fact of the matter is he doesn't have one. That's just the fact of the matter. Of course he has an agent, isn't it? He's Christopher Nolan. I mean, he would be outrageous if he didn't have an agent or some sort of assistant. You know what I mean? He's worth millions and millions of dollars. And so, you know, like, so we have to get in that mentality of working on our reactiveness towards the phone, but also working on our general agitation from the consumption of information and you know, digital overload. And that's the whole practice of fasting the mind, right?
Like you mentioned before, how the Tristan,
Tristan Harris.
Harris, he mentioned that how our brain can't keep up with the amount of information and algorithm work in technology, so that we get in touch with so much information each day, right? And that sits in our subconscious mind, and it sits there, and like you don't know what's happening inside your brain, but always it'll have an effect on you, right? Emotionally, you might react to something, but consciously you might not remember, or you don't pay too much attention to it. But because it stays within your subconscious mind, it'll just make all sorts of scrambled noise inside you. So that these four fundamentals that you mentioned is to cleanse all that the subconscious trash, the garbage, the noise, so that you can finally come back to the real reality that you're standing on.
Normality.
Yes.
Because like what the fundamental practice, especially in Eastern spirituality, is coming back to equanimity. Your mind is naturally equanimous. The state of the mind, without conditioning and without an overload of content, is empty, spontaneous, and free. So it functions as nature functions. That's the nature of the mind. But the mind has, as you mentioned with the subconscious, it has this ability to accumulate samskaras, mental impressions and subliminal imprints. And so it has that ability, which then affects your whole way of behaving. And so we are now, because of social media and the internet and digital technology in general, constantly bombarded with information, sound bites, and it's affecting your being at a fundamental level. It's affecting your being. Instantly, if you go on YouTube and you just scroll the feed of videos, you are in some sense torturing yourself, because you're allowing yourself to be prostituted by stuff, by information that you would never randomly come across. You're open for business.
Yes.
When how did YouTube originally function? You typed in what you were interested in. We were typing Eastern spirituality. We came across people that were teaching Eastern spirituality way back in the day, 2006, 2007, and this and that. That's what you looked for, and you found. And you found people that were interested in the same thing. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. But there's no reason that you should be watching something and something random appears, but then it has a clickbaity title, and then the mind starts, the gears start to grind, and then you're gone then. You're falling down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, then you're in.
You're in, yeah. You're in. You're locked in.
You're locked in, and whenever you get tired, you might just fall asleep while you're watching something.
Got to get that last tweet off before I go to bed. But so you need a strategy for digital detox, because the way we consume energy, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, is we consume energy through our eyes and our ears. Well, let's take out the mouth out of it. But psychologically, this is how we consume energy. So what we hear and what we see makes up our experience of life and how we are going to behave and manifest the life for ourselves. That's how it's controlled. That's what samskaras do. Samskaras influence your habits, your vasanas, and your tendencies, which then determines your karma, determines the way that you behave and act in the world, both unconsciously and conscious action. And so you're constantly, because if you're putting yourself in a position where you have a lot of noise coming in, you better goddamn have a better defense against that stuff, because you'll need a strong defense against it, because it's going to constantly encroach on your well-being.
Like you said about fast food analogy before, if we eat fast food all the time, eating, it leads to a lot of numerous diseases down the track, right?
Yes.
Same way, we take in the fast food information, processed information constantly through our eyes and ears, then, you
can only get sick.
Yeah, that's right. You will just suffer from all sorts of mental, psychological problems.
The sickness here is depression, schizophrenia,
exactly.
Anxiety, stress, and unfortunately, suicide.
Suicide, yes.
So strategies for digital detox are quite simple, as we mentioned, with the 4 fundamentals. Be active, start to have more human-to-human interaction, and especially don't be influenced by the online discourse, because that in some sense is not even related to you. You have to remember that it's not related to you. what's happening in Russia has no bearing on what's happening if you live in Bangladesh. You know, so like it may be, for example, it may be interesting to see what's happening in Russia, but that shouldn't determine how you behave in your immediate environment. You have to think about it naturally. That would never have happened 100 years ago. So why is it happening now, and why do we accept it as if that is normal? It's not normal, and it's not psychologically healthy to adopt certain foreign ideas and so forth and so on as if that relates to your life, your immediate life in general. And a lot of people often do this, especially with America, right? People take on America's problems as their problems, or they take on what America think is good as what is good for them. Yeah. And I can tell you this, Americans don't do it the other way around. They don't look at what's good in Bangladesh and take on what's good in Bangladesh. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? So you have to really be careful about how digital technology is influencing you, the way you behave, the way you think. And especially if you're starting to behave like a troll and you're starting to police other people's thoughts and to block free flow of ideas and so forth and so on, and you become a social justice warrior, and you're addicted to activism, then you have to take a step back.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you have to actually explore your motivations for that. What motivates you to do that, first and foremost? Are the motivations pure? Are they? No. Most of the time they wouldn't be, because they would be influenced by a foreign entity that's influenced you, and it has no bearing on your immediate environment. So you have to be very careful about that.
Definitely. And a lot of us are using social media platform for like killing time when you don't have anything much to do, and so using it as a kind of entertainment tool. But like Carl Newport's work, like with deep work and digital minimalism and all that, he says that don't use internet as an entertainment. No. Use it as an educational and also just for a communication tool. Yeah. Right? And I mean, I'd like to say to people to just make a hobby, to be more active on doing something, and something to increase your creativity or something like that. Yeah. Right?
Learn something.
Yeah, I mean, something that you always wanted to do, but you just keep pushing it back, procrastinate about it. But just reduce time that you spend on the screen and just proactive about the things that you always wanted to do offline in the real world, I would say.
Yes.
You wanted to read a bunch of books and go and get some books and get into it, you know. 100%. And you want to always lose some weight, go out and do some exercise and change your diet, be proactive about it, you know. Go out and...
Go full power.
Yeah, cycling and lift some weights, you know. That makes your life a whole lot better, you know.
You become more vibrant.
Exactly.
Better person to be around.
And
it's no-brainer.
Exactly. You wanted to learn music, go out and learn music. Never late for learning anything, really. You know, wanted to paint something, go out and buy a paintbrush and a canvas. It's not expensive.
But you've tried teaching me music, and it's like a brick wall, right?
Yeah, well, you're better at writing books, so stick to what you're good at.
Stick to what I'm good at.
What I always say, stick to what you're good at.
Yeah. Sorry, my love.
Yeah.
But, well, I've had that before, right? People have contacted me on YouTube going, mate, how are you so prolific in writing and creating YouTube content? I'm not surfing like we saw on The Social Dilemma, right? Those kids had spent 6 hours a week on just Instagram. Could you imagine? How many pictures do you have to have a look at? I don't even know how that works.
I wish I had the 6 hours.
yeah, exactly. You could use it. You could use it well, couldn't you? But you know what I mean? And I simply explained to them, I don't have the same relationship with not just the social media, but the internet in general as most people. I read books. I have to read books if I want to write and work on my craft, especially in developing the knowledge that I've been developing for 10 years. working on the traditions and so forth and so on. So if I'm online and looking at clickbait and this and that, that's going to just absolutely be detrimental to my work, and I won't be able to go forward. I don't even look at myself as prolific. I look at people like Aldous Huxley and D.T. Suzuki as prolific. Would they write over 100 books? Like, they must have been writing when they're on the toilet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, so... But yeah, sure, I could write a book a year or 2 books a year, maybe, if I pushed it. But that is only because I've given myself the time. Same with you with music, same with people who actually create anything in general. How do you create things? Give yourself time. And what's detrimental to your time? Television, internet, chit-chat, all of that.
Although we all have such busy schedule, I think you can always make time.
Always.
You can always make time for something that you always wanted to do.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer on that. So, yeah, you never say, I don't have time, I don't have time for this and that. But if it's something that you really wanted to do it, you always have time.
Yeah. Well, when I began as a writer, as you know, I had a 9-to-5 job, coming home, working. This is just the way it is. And obviously, you keep doing it, and then you evolve out of that work, and then you transfer more over to what, you know, that's not going to happen for everyone, but it can happen if you put enough focus and concentration and just general effort into what matters to you. And what doesn't matter to any of us is social media. It does not matter to us.
And another thing I wanted to add is that, say you go out and do things that you wanted to do, right? And people often expect the rewards from it. Like, it's good to have goal and to achieve something, but if you do it for the sake of show off to other people, or to put back in the social media what you've done for people to see, right? That's a wrong motivation.
No, that's wrong motivation.
You are doing it purely because you love it. You really, really enjoy it. And when you're actually doing it, you feel the pure joy in the process of doing it. That's why you are doing it, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And you develop these things that you're doing in your real life, then social media in the end is actually, like, it just doesn't matter to you. Like, it doesn't have a meaning to you anymore.
It becomes a tool maybe for your work. Well, like what I do, it becomes like a tool to hopefully engage people in an intelligent dialogue about deep topics that matter, instead of, like, you know, whatever's a popular thing online. I don't know what's trending and all this stuff, but do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I always, when Facebook first came around, right, in 2005 or 6, I don't really know when it was, I remember talking to my friends about it, and we kind of thought that it was going to be a good thing for intelligent dialogue between people that you've never met before. And actually, back in that day, because the whole evolution of a troll didn't exist at that time, there was a lot more common courtesy and just general niceness online. And so there was intelligent dialogues. That's why you saw at the beginning, actually, forums were more popular than social media, because forums still allowed for that intelligent dialogue, exploring ideas very well. People spoke to each other well-mannered. There was, some of the forums that I was involved with, there was no arguments with people. There was like trying to understand each other, or maybe like we agree to disagree in the end, like generally how adults usually have behaved before social media. We disagree to disagree, it's okay. I still like you as a person, but our views are different, whatever. We can move on, we can move past this.
Right. A healthy exchange of thoughts.
Yeah, of course, yes. And that's how it was. That's still how I envision social media can be. But I think that, you know, as what's happening now, there has to be we got to get a little bit dirty, because we haven't fully understood what it is at the moment. You know, it's a lot more complex than understanding what television was in the beginning, right? Like, because television is pretty generic. You either watch it or you don't. You just turn off. You know, right. and it's a thing that's run by advertising and so forth and so on. Okay, so we got it, right? you and I haven't had a TV since 2008. So, and we've never missed it, actually. But social media is a completely different thing because it's run by algorithms and feedback loops and this and that keeps you addicted and engaged. And so you have to be completely mindful. But I still have a hope there that if there is some sort of regulation on social media, especially in regards to like the psychological damage it's causing to people, young people especially, but also adults, then we can start to go back to what it probably was initially thought of as a tool to express ideas and explore those ideas in an intelligent way without having conflict and being so biased and so forth and so on, right? Like the free flow of ideas has been the hallmark of democracy, right? And the Western thought in general, but we're policing each other now. It's gone very, like, I don't even know what to say, like communist, like a communist, you know, communism.
Almost, yeah.
Like where we start to police each other's thoughts and, oh, he believes in this, he's cancelled. It's like, but that's not like, it's not intelligent, and you're not contributing to the discussion. You're shouting and you're trying to discredit people without, you don't know enough about them. You don't know probably enough about what they're speaking about, you know. Actually, in the beginning, when social media came about, back in that time, I learned a lot from a lot of people, actually, because people posted things in relation to, especially because all I was looking at Eastern spirituality, things I never thought about, and I explored that, and I was like, well, that's really contributed, and you know, I would thank that person individually for, you know, enlightening me on a different perspective. Say if it was about Buddhism or something like this,
Definitely.
which you would get a lot in forums, but it did exist in social media. So
I think what's also important is that we need to bring back the important value to respect one another, regardless what their political agenda is, and because we are all human beings, we are all in the one planet, and we're in the same species. We always gonna be with each other. Always gonna we have to be with each other to evolve going forward, right? So that we need to respect each other, no matter you disagree or agree. And like, I mean, in the Eastern countries, the Asian countries, as you know, the argument never really been welcomed in the cultural wise. No. Why? Because the community health of community is much more important than what you think. Yeah. But because of social media culture developing this extreme individualism that contribute to the policing each other's thought and whatnot, and that kind of brings a separation. But we need to actually understand one another as a human. Yeah. You know, so. Doesn't matter what those other people think. It doesn't really matter to you. No, of course not. Right, but you don't have to be opinionated over someone's idea, and you have this like will to impose your opinion. Your agenda. Yeah, that doesn't really. In the end, it doesn't really matter to me because that's not important. At the end of the day. If we all go this path of social justice warriors or whatnot, we're gonna eventually kill each other. Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's how
civil war.
Yeah, that's one of the cause the human species ending. Yeah. You know, so
it's kind of sad that we're in this situation, right? And something as simple as, do you just listen to each other? Something as simple as just listen to each other is profound. Because what we're seeing is people just aren't listening to each other. They're shouting at each other and they have a subjective viewpoint. You can't solve a situation from a subjective viewpoint. You have to listen and evolve ideas and perspectives and see the diversity of opinion and then move forward. Not just push your agenda, your beliefs, your subjective viewpoint, which is limited, and think that that's best for everyone. That's intellectual imperialism. It doesn't work. It never has worked, and it never will work.
The real listening, the true sense of listening, is come from deep compassion and empathy, I think.
Yes, 100%.
Because you are willing to listen what the other person got to say, whether you want to agree or not. That's not important. You have a deep trust and compassion to listen to that person thoroughly, deeply, not filtered, you know.
Yeah.
And that's important.
It is important. Just listening. It's not hard. You just listen. It's not hard, right? You're taught to listen when you're a child. Listen to your parents, listen to the school teacher. This is how you developed, good manners and things that are beneficial in society.
Yeah.
But what are we doing? We're turning our back on good manners. We're not listening to each other. We're becoming like a nuisance to society.
Yeah, everyone else is your enemy, kind of thing.
And that's a bad place to start from, right?
It's so laborsome,
Oh, yeah.
so tiresome, so stressful.
I don't know how anyone can do it.
I don't want to be there.
No. I want to be a friend to humanity. I don't want to be...
That's the easiest way.
Easiest way.
Like,
be nice, be a friend.
What Dwayne The Rock...
His grandmother,
His grandmother said the easiest thing is to be kind to people. That's so true.
Yeah. And that's just simple wisdom, right? If you want to do well in life, she said to Dwayne, just be nice to people. And not just do well in life to gain anything, but just be nice to people, because that's, again, it's like what you were mentioning before. We're all human beings, right? We all have the same, we're all endowed with the same feelings, that same intrinsic sort of psychological state. But we're not honoring that in other people. We're not respecting that in other people. And we're starting to encroach on their beliefs, encroach on their own, lives. And
that's so childish.
It's childish, yeah. We have developed and evolved as a species from understanding diversity, not from, imposing our will over others.
And appreciate the diversity.
Yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
And that's how we can all evolve, how we can make things better.
Yeah. Well, that's just how they do things over there. That's it. You have no skin in the game. You shouldn't have an opinion. You don't know enough. There's because when you're trying to understand a nation or a culture, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of things to understand. Details. You can't just spout out anything that, you feel is righteous on your part. So the best course of medicine to deal with that sort of behavior and the addictions that arise from that behavior is to concentrate on those fundamentals, lifestyle habits of looking at, appreciating the food you eat mindful eating, eat healthy food, whatever according to whatever diet you deem as healthy. Exercise, move your body around, stop sitting around and looking at the screen. Cultivate a meditation practice once or twice a day. I recommend for 30 minutes or longer. And for Christ's sake, get at least 7 hours sleep, but ideally 8 hours sleep.
And also just go out for a walk without any digital device. Just go 100%. Out for a walk and appreciate the fresh air, appreciate sunshine, or trees and birds, just how things are, and just your immediate environment. Just appreciate all those things, and that'll calm you down.
100%.
Yeah.
How many funny looks have we had, like during the pandemic? We go out for a hot coffee, not hot coffee, hot chocolate, and the person at the thing will say, "Oh, you need to sign in." I don't know what they call that code thing.
QC code or whatever that is. Yeah.
And we say, "Oh, we don't have a smartphone," and we
then when we say that,
the look on their face is like my God, it's like my grandparents, like
oh.
And some people actually don't believe. Some people think, "Oh yeah, sure you don't have a phone with you.
You're just lazy, you don't want to do it."
And it's
we really don't have a phone.
Some people are pretty cool about it, some people aren't.
Can we just sign in
manually?
Manually.
And lucky they still have paper.
Pen and paper.
The old school way, right?
But
Always
again,
works.
like again, the good example last week when we go to a football game
Yeah, of
on
course.
Friday night, we had printed out a ticket with the barcode, and you can the tick on the thing.
Yeah.
And about hundreds of people had problems, thousands of people, because on that code on the phone wasn't working. Because some sort of network problem.
So we were already in the game. We got our feet up and we're like, oh yeah, this is good. And we're like,
but then like after
outside.
5-10 minutes later, because the stadium was still quite empty, and where's everybody? And then 5-10 minutes later, this bloody
an army
of
flies coming.
Yeah, coming in. Oh, what happened to them? And
always revert to what works.
Yeah.
That digital stuff, man, is unpredictable. But guess what? Printed paper, 100%.
Always works.
Always works. But again, like developing a healthy lifestyle where you're trying to take care of your mind and your body, it's just so simple. It's so simple, right? Like, and once you are taking care of this, things like stress and anxiety may still arise, but they're easy to manage. And things like depression don't even exist for you. No matter what some troll says to you inconsiderately, it doesn't matter because you are taking care of what is immediate, which is your body and your mind.
Yeah, you have much more objective viewpoint on that as well. In that immediate moment, that person maybe just having a bad day, or that comment doesn't really matter to me.
No.
This kind of conclusion, but it's quick.
Yeah.
You know?
You have clarity.
Yeah.
You have pure clarity. Again, like what I mentioned, we should, in some sense, when in our practice and in our lifestyle, be cultivating equanimity, because the mind is naturally equanimous. And so if you're overfeeding your mind with junk from social media and the internet, you're not going to be in that state of consciousness. And that means that you're going to behave in a way that's not natural. It's not that that's who you are. It's that you're, in a sense, unconsciously cultivating yourself to behave in a very weird manner that's totally against your psychology. Yeah. So I highly recommend fasting the mind. Spend a lot of time away, as much as you can, from the screen in general, right?
Make it the lasting.
Yeah.
If you have a minute, the lasting.
Yeah.
Make it.
Well, Cal Newport has that. He has that mantra at 5 o'clock every day, right? Shut down complete. Turns the computer off when he leaves work. He doesn't have social media, so he's got no problems there. But he doesn't go on the internet at home. He lives really old school. Reads a book. Actually talks to his wife instead of being on the iPad while there's, how many times have we seen this? And
talking each other.
Not even looking at each other. They're in their own world, you know what I mean? Like, you and I are always like engrossed in what we're doing together. And so, and also another thing I would like to recommend is digital sunsets. There's another way of countering this, which will actually help your meditation practice. Digital sunset is that at about 5 or 6 p.m. in the afternoon, you turn off all digital devices. You make sure you get all those emails you need to get away before that time, and you just turn it off. It's done. And what that does is you're not taking any blue light in, because when you're taking the blue light in from the screen, that suppresses the secretion of melatonin from the pineal gland, which affects your sleep. So you're initially you are like young, you're like active. When you should be sleeping. You should be yin.
Yes.
And so digital sunsets is one of the practices that you and I practice as much as we can, which what happens then is it helps our sleep, and then in the morning meditation, your mind is naturally more clear, helps you allowed to go deeper in your meditation. And then your day is just on the ascent. Yeah. You might go for a walk or a bike ride or something after that, and everything is just shanti. The whole day is good. Yeah. But if you go to sleep late and you're tweeting at 2 a.m. and
it just affects next day and day after.
It compounds.
You have to stop.
I talk about briefly in Emotional Intuition for Peak Performance about that ability to build momentum
Right.
with your lifestyle. So you're essentially trying to build momentum, because once you build that momentum, you're running downhill.
Yeah.
So if you're practicing digital sunsets, you're meditating, you're eating healthy, what happens? What's the byproduct of all those four? You cultivate intelligence more, and your creativity is more on point.
And you're much happier.
You're much happier. So the food for us when we're healthy is cultivating intelligence and harnessing creativity, because we're great creators, but we're also an intelligent species. So you should be trying to cultivate more intelligence. And, we recommend reading as a discipline.
Yeah.
Make it a discipline, like meditation is a discipline. Don't make reading tweets, these 240 characters or whatever you can type, a discipline, because it's a soundbite. Can't do anything. Don't watch a 5-minute YouTube clip that says it explains Hinduism and think you understand Hinduism. You need more research.
Yeah.
Not anything against those 5-minute videos. I've made 5-minute videos myself. But you can't explain everything in that 5 minutes.
Just use it as a tool.
As a tool. Have a healthy distance from it. Have a healthy distance. Take care of yourself. Take care of your lifestyle. And we will begin to turn the corner on the health and sanity of each and every individual. And that's basically what you and I are always focused on, isn't it? So,
create a much happier world.
stop shouting at each other, people.
Yeah.
Don't shout at each other no more. Just be nice to each other. It's not hard to be nice.
Good for everybody.
Good for everyone. Everyone's happy. People are not always going to agree with what you like.
And never try too hard to convince other people.
Yeah. I was told that from a young age. Jason, you little idiot. People are not going to always agree with you, but you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Not that I was opinionated, but that's the advice I received. And obviously teaching Eastern spirituality, Jesus, you have to get used to people not agreeing with what you say. Even people who think they're spiritual, that's not Taoism to me.
Wink.
Wink. Anyway, so guys, well, really, we dug right into that. So we hope you guys benefited from it. I'm sure that a lot of you will be triggered, but remember, you're an adult. Behave yourself. Remember.
Take a breath before reacting.
Take a breath before reacting. Breathe. Breathe deeply down to the lower dantian, down in there. Get it right down. And remember, Guy Young and I are in service to you guys doing these podcasts. So you can respect that, or you don't have to respect that. But if you don't respect it, it's easier to move on than making a song and dance about it. So I hope you guys learned a lot about it. We highly recommend going and watching The Social Dilemma. If you don't have Netflix, then find someone who does, like what we did, and really consider it. And if you enjoy what we talked about, make sure you go on over to my publisher, Inner Traditions, and tell them to step on the gas with my book, because it needs to be published ASAP. So guys, thank you, and we'll see you guys next week.